Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Before we went on the break, we were looking down the series of Bapsi Sidhwa's novels, and the novel that I was asking you about, the next novel or the fourth novel, and Bapsi had also mentioned the name in the conversation, and I had asked you to recall that name. I'm sure you must have guessed that we are talking about The American Brat, which comes next in the series of Bapsi Sidhwa's novels. And before we talk about this and Water, which is her next novel, I want to come back and ask Amina Syed about a funny story she was telling us about the kind of reactions that people have when they read The Crow Eaters.
Well, Asif, you know, my husband and I read before going off to sleep, and I had switched off my lamp when after a while the bed started shaking. So I got a little disturbed, and then I was dozing off again, and after a little while it shook again. And I looked, and my husband Amir was reading The Crow Eaters, and he just could not restrain himself. It was so funny, and he often quotes the jokes from it, and it's such a funny book. I feel that, you know, whoever hasn't read it has missed something.
So it's really a mover and a shaker, and sometimes it may be the bed and not the earthquake which is moving beds in Karachi. So is that the kind of reactions your books inspire in people?
Well, I've seen the influence of Crow Eaters on a lot of Indian writers also, because after this suddenly Indian writers felt they had the permission to create Parsi characters. Otherwise they were afraid to. Vikram Seth in his beautiful novel, that big fat novel, kya tha uska?
Suitable Boy.
Suitable Boy. He's used Parsi characters as funny. Rushdie was published a year after me by Jonathan Cape in London, and he has also suddenly, you know, got Parsi characters. I'm not sure if it's in that book or the next. And somehow the irreverence and the humor also started, I felt, more so after that book, in India and in Pakistan.
Also that you could poke fun at people in a gentle way without being cruel or sarcastic.
Yeah, exactly. You can't be cynical all the time, but you can make people appear sympathetically portrayed, you know, and still poke fun at them. People found the characters in The Crow Eaters endearing. They liked them, you know. They didn't find them objectionable.
That's
in spite of them being, you know, slightly inclined to commit murder or slightly inclined to commit arson. Or, you know,
but only slightly.
Yeah.
or slightly inclined to make money.
That's the big,
that in a big way.
Yeah, that's a Parsi hobby.
Do you feel it's a safe territory to write about Parsi characters, and do you feel that you can relate to other groups also or other kinds of experience?
Of course, each of my books has a lot of non-Parsi characters, Muslim, Punjabi, Bombay characters, you know, Hindus, Sikhs, all sorts of characters. And I can relate to all of them because I'm very much, you know, somebody read my books in Lahore, and he was a big Punjabi critic, and he said, "You are the best Punjabi writer."
That
Pakistan.
You are.
You know?
Because anybody who loves Lahore so much, how could he or she be otherwise?
But I, Kudrati, you know, naturally I portrayed the Punjabi character, I think.
और बहुत मजे में किया है.
Ji, yeah, it's a funny, you know, they are funny, fun-loving people.
But then again, moving on to Water. Water is a very different kind of book from her previous novels, and I wonder if Tayyiba, you have a reaction to Water. First of all, it's a book based on a movie.
That's right. Yes. Yes, it was but I remember speaking to Bapsi about it, and she said this was done in the reverse. The movie was made first, and then the book was done. So I don't know how difficult it was for Bapsi to write it, but it again flowed. It was very readable again, and it did. It was an effortless for the reader. It seemed as if it was an effortless bit of writing. It was very compelling.
But do you see this book as independent of the movie? I mean, if you have not seen the movie, will the book suffice by itself?
Yes, I think so. Yes, definitely. It can definitely stand alone. I mean, it was Bapsi who brought it, made me conscious that it was the movie that was made first, and I did the book.
But while you are reading the book, that does not come across that it's based on a movie.
Not at all.
No.
In fact, I was surprised because it won the Primo Mandello in Italy, which is like the Booker Prize of Italy.
All right.
They loved it as it stands alone. And the only other book for a sort of comparison is Isaac Asimov made a novel out of one of the movies. I think he'd written the script for that.
Okay.
And people said that fell flat. Whereas this book has acquired a sort of a life of its own.
Yes.
And OUP has published it here.
That's right.
Yeah.
Actually, it's it was somebody who has not seen the film and they read the book. It's like a revelation of how things were in Varanasi, and it's
That
really
is why
independent.
That is why Deepa, she sort of persuaded me, please write this book, because I cannot explain why the widows are treated this way.
Yes.
And I then made quite a study of Hindu widows and Hindu culture, and from that I included all that stuff as naturally as I could. And it's important information for people to understand why this happens. There are today even 12 million Hindu widows rotting in ashrams. So it is a sort of activist film, and it was comparatively easy to write because the plot was there, the characters were there,
How long
And then
did this take you then, Bapsi, to write?
She told me to write it in 3 months to coincide with the release of the movie, but it took me 4 months.
4 months.
Which is for me absurdly fast, because I would write even at night, even when I got up, I was dreaming of it. It was very fast.
So Water is still as readable as your other books. In fact, it's a different kind of book. But let me now take the conversation to a slightly different series of questions. And before we go into the break, I want to talk about some of the younger Pakistani writers who are now dominating the scene. And I would like our audience to think about the Pakistani writer who has written the introduction to a number of Bapsi Sidhwa novels, and this is the Pakistani writer whose book Gulmohar Tree is being talked about. So try and remember the name of the writer of a series of introductions to Bapsi Sidhwa's novels, the author of Gulmohar Tree.